Imagine standing at the threshold of a cave, the air inside cool and thick with the scent of stone and mystery, your eyes gradually adjusting to the shifting shadows on the walls. Now picture this. Thousands of years ago, long before written words or recorded history, another human stands in exactly this place, listening to the echoes of a sound so ancient it seems to pulse with the heartbeat of the world itself. That sound is not merely the wind or the call of distant animals. It is something altogether more deliberate, more meaningful. It is the music of the cave people, a world of rhythm, voice, and raw creativity, born not in grand halls, but in the darkness beneath the earth. And this is where our journey begins. Why do, in the era of streaming platforms and digital playlists, feel such a powerful pull toward these distant origins? What stirs us to wonder what kind of music filled those caves? What melodies may have danced across stone walls painted with hunting scenes and mysterious symbols? The answer, perhaps, lies within us just as much as within the earth. Music, after all, is woven into the fabric of what it means to be human. It binds us together, gives voice to our joys and fears, and expresses that which cannot be spoken. To understand the music of our ancestors is to look into a mirror that reflects not only their world, but our own. Through the faint traces of their songs, we catch glimpses of their lives, moments when the lines between ritual, survival, and art blurred into a single, unbroken experience. Every civilization, no matter how advanced or simple, has turned to sound to tell stories, mark moments of change, and find solace in the unknown. But the music of the cave people stands apart, shrouded in an even deeper layer of mystery, precisely because so little of it remains for us to find. We might never hear an authentic recording of a Paleolithic melody. There are no cave tapes, no fossilized audio tracks. Yet the search for this lost world of sound is about more than nostalgia or idle curiosity. It is a journey that touches something primal within us, the sense that if we can get close enough to their music, we can almost touch their world, understand their fears and dreams, and perhaps even glimpse the moment when creativity first sparked into being. It is a longing to feel connected to the human chain that stretches across millennia, a chain forged not just by language or tool-making, but by the universal impulse to create something beautiful from the simplest means. Archaeologists and anthropologists have spent decades sifting through the earth in search of the oldest clues. They have discovered fragments of bone flutes, bits of decorated drums, and tantalizingly ambiguous objects that might have once carried a tune. But for every artifact, there is an ocean of silence. And yet, in that silence, our imagination steps in. What did it sound like when those first notes bounced off the rock walls? Did children laugh and dance to the rhythm? Did elders close their eyes and drift away on memories shaped by song? We wonder because we recognize ourselves in those distant figures, the need to celebrate, to mourn, to hope, to belong. Perhaps most fascinating is the idea that the first music was not an invention, but a discovery. The cave person did not set out to create an art form, but simply followed the pulse of nature, the patterns in the world around them. The rhythm of footsteps, the rush of water, the crackle of fire, these were the building blocks from which music slowly emerged. Over time, as hands clapped and voices rose in chorus, those simple sounds became messages, then rituals, and finally, a language beyond words. In this sense, the origins of music are as much about listening as about playing. Our journey into the world of cave people's music is not only about the past. It is about the present and the future, about the search for meaning in a noisy world. It is about the hope that by listening carefully enough, we can rediscover something essential, something that still echoes, however faintly, in every song we sing today. So, as we take our first steps into the depths of history, guided only by shadows and fragments, we do so not as strangers peering in from the outside, but as fellow travelers drawn by the same universal call to make sense of our world through music, just as they once did. In the chapters that follow, we will slip further into the darkness, chasing after the elusive sounds that have long since faded, and uncover the secrets of the first musicians. What we discover may change the way we think about music, and ourselves, forever. The mystery at the heart of our journey is both simple and profound. Where do we look for the traces of music that was never written down, never recorded, never captured in anything but the memory of those who played and heard it? If you walk into a prehistoric cave, you'll see shadows dancing across walls, shapes that time has softened but not erased. There are handprints, mysterious animals, hunting scenes, and strange looping lines. But there are no notes, no written melodies, nothing that says, this is how we sang, this is how we played. Music, by its very nature, is a vanishing act, a fleeting thing, a vibration in the air that's gone as quickly as it's born. It leaves no bones for the archaeologist's brush to uncover, no fossils for the museum display. How, then, do we search for echoes in a world that has gone silent?
The hunt for prehistoric music is, in many ways, an exercise in imagination as much as in science. But it's not a fruitless search. Human curiosity is relentless, and researchers have learned to read between the lines, to follow clues hidden in places where you'd never expect to find a song. The first clue, surprisingly, is not a sound at all, but a picture. When early people pressed their hands against the cave walls and painted them in red ochre and charcoal, they did more than decorate their homes. They told stories, shared hopes, and marked events. But some believe they also left behind hints of their rituals, rituals that may have included music. In some caves, the placement of art seems almost deliberate, as if it was chosen for the way sound carries in that particular chamber, the way a voice booms or a drumbeat lingers. Recent studies have shown that in some of the world's oldest caves, paintings cluster in spots with the most interesting acoustics, resonant, echoing spaces where every shout or tap turns into something magical. It's as if the cave itself was a musical instrument, and the art on its walls a signpost for the kind of ceremony that might have filled it with rhythm and song. But paintings and carvings are only one thread in this ancient tapestry. The real treasure for the seekers of prehistoric music is something far more tangible, yet still painfully rare: the musical instrument. Over the decades, archaeologists have uncovered fragments of flutes, simple drums, and objects that could have served as rattles or bells. Some of the oldest flutes ever discovered, painstakingly carved from vulture bones or mammoth tusks, date back more than 40,000 years. They are hauntingly delicate, their finger holes worn smooth by the hands of their makers. To hold one is to feel the weight of centuries, the urge to lift it to your lips and blow, just to hear if a ghost of that ancient melody still lingers within. Even the most humble objects may have been pressed into service as instruments. A hollow bone, a string of shells, a set of stones arranged just so. These could have made a symphony if only we could hear them as their creators did. Sometimes archaeologists stumble across what look like ordinary tools, only to discover, under the right conditions, they produce a resonant note when struck or plucked. The line between tool and instrument blurs in the world of early humans, and it is up to us to listen carefully for what might have been. But the challenge remains immense. Most prehistoric instruments were made of perishable materials, wood, reeds, animal skins that vanished long ago. What survives is just the tiniest fraction, the lucky remnants that escaped rot and ruin. This forces modern scientists to become detectives, reconstructing not only what an object is, but how it might have been used. Sometimes it takes a leap of intuition. Could this groove on a bone be the mark of a string? Could this battered shell have been part of a necklace? Or did it once rattle in time to a song? Beyond artifacts and art, there are subtler signs. In some caves, researchers have found faint, regular scratches on the walls, as if a stick or stone was dragged rhythmically in time with a chant. There are traces of fire in particular spots, suggesting gatherings, and the chemical remnants of pigments that hint at elaborate ceremonies. All these pieces fit together into a puzzle that, when viewed from the right angle, suggests something truly remarkable. That music was not just an accidental byproduct of daily life, but an intentional, cherished part of human existence, even when survival was a daily struggle. Modern technology adds a new layer to this search. Acoustic scientists can map how sound moves through caves, identifying spots where voices or drums would have sounded especially powerful. Some even recreate the ancient spaces digitally, testing out melodies and rhythms to see how they would have echoed and blended. It's a blend of science, art, and a kind of empathy, a willingness to step outside our modern selves and listen, just for a moment, with the ears of someone who lived in a world ruled by darkness and firelight. As we sift through the dust and silence, piecing together the forgotten music of our ancestors, we are reminded that their world was not so different from ours. Their search for meaning, their drive to create, and their joy in the act of making music all still resonate today, if we know where and how to listen. So the search continues, every artifact a possible note, every echo a memory waiting to be awakened. As we push further into the unknown, hungry for the melodies that shaped us before history began to write its own song. In the flickering light of a campfire, shadows leap and stretch along the curved surfaces of a cave's inner sanctum. This is a place where walls breathe stories, and every surface is alive with purpose. Imagine for a moment the hands that pressed pigments into the stone, tracing the outline of a bison, the leap of a hunter, the mysterious shapes that seem to hover between dream and memory. These artists, whose works have endured for tens of thousands of years, were not simply decorating their world, they were composing the first symphonies of meaning, weaving together vision and sound in ways we are only beginning to understand. The act of creating art in these echoing chambers was never an isolated task. For early humans, painting was inseparable from the rhythms of daily life, from ritual, and most intriguingly, from music itself. In many ways, the cave artist and the musician were one and the same, both serving as mediators between the seen and the unseen, the known and the mysterious. When a figure appeared on the stone, it was more than a record. It was an invocation, a living presence summoned through shape and color, voice and rhythm. These acts often happened in concert, as part of ceremonies that bound the group together, celebrating, petitioning, or simply surviving another day in a wild, unpredictable world. We tend to think of art and music as separate pursuits, divided neatly by modern categories. But in the age of the caves, they were fused in a single, flowing experience. The same hands that daubed red ochre onto rock might have drummed on hollow logs, shaken rattles, or raised their voices in song.
The artist's brushstroke was accompanied by the beat of a drum, the stamping of feet, the chanting of words whose meaning was deepened by the echoing walls. Each creative act enhanced the others, turning a simple image into a doorway, a piece of music into a living story. Archaeologists have long noticed a strange harmony in the arrangement of cave art. In some sites, the most detailed and evocative paintings cluster in chambers with the richest acoustics, rooms where sound swells and lingers, where a single note can hang in the air long after it is played. This cannot be a coincidence. It suggests that the creators understood, intuitively or by experience, that these spaces could amplify more than just the voice. They could magnify the power of ritual, joining image and sound in a moment of communal transformation. Imagine a group gathered deep within the earth, far from the ordinary world. The artist marks the wall, but the act is far from silent. There is a cadence to the brushwork, a rhythm as pigments are ground and mixed, as hands move in time with the music of the moment. Perhaps there is chanting, the voices of many rising and falling, filling the chamber with energy. The ritual is multisensory, color and motion, echo and vibration, a choreography of bodies and souls. For those within the circle, the boundaries between the physical and spiritual worlds blur. To create art is to summon power. To make music is to give it voice. These first composers did not write symphonies as we know them, but they built immersive experiences that were as much about feeling as about form. Their masterpieces were not merely seen or heard, they were inhabited, shared, lived. Every painting was both a memory and a prophecy, a celebration of what had been and a hope for what might yet come. The cave itself was transformed into a stage, a sacred space where the ordinary became extraordinary, where every drumbeat and every pigment stroke reverberated with meaning. There is a certain beauty in this unity of the senses, a reminder that our urge to create is not confined to a single mode of expression. The first composers painted with sound and sang with color. They found inspiration in the pulse of nature, the flow of the seasons, the hunger and gratitude that shaped their existence. Their legacy endures not only in the masterpieces preserved on stone, but in every gathering where humans come together to make meaning out of the world, to share story and song, to celebrate what it is to be alive. As we imagine these ancient gatherings, we begin to see that the history of music and art is not just a record of what was, but a map of how we continue to connect, across time, across cultures, through every note and brushstroke. The cave artists in their hidden galleries may not have known that their creations would one day outlast empires and languages. But perhaps in the echo of their songs and the enduring colors of their images, they understood something essential, that creativity, once awakened, never truly disappears. It moves from hand to hand, voice to voice, echoing through the ages, inviting us all to listen, to see, to remember. The story of music's beginnings is etched not in parchment or ancient scripts, but in the subtle, fragile remnants that have waited patiently beneath the earth for tens of thousands of years. Long before orchestras and sheet music, even before the first primitive words were exchanged in the glow of the campfire, someone, somewhere, picked up a hollow bone, pressed it to their lips, and sent a trembling note spinning through the darkness. That single act, a moment of curiosity, perhaps, or a flicker of inspiration, set in motion a legacy that has echoed across all of human history. Our understanding of these earliest instruments is shaped by rare and precious discoveries. Among the most remarkable are the ancient flutes, carved from the wing bones of birds or the ivory of mammoths, unearthed in caves scattered across Europe. Some are so delicate and refined that it's hard not to marvel at the skill and patience their makers possessed. In the caves of Hohlefels and Geisenklosterlei in Germany, archaeologists found flutes more than 40,000 years old, with precisely bored finger holes and smoothly polished surfaces. To hold such a flute is to touch a timeline that stretches back to the very dawn of culture, a moment when making music was as natural as breathing, as essential as fire or shelter. These flutes are more than mere curiosities. They are proof that the people of the Ice Age were not just struggling for survival, but reaching for something higher, something transcendent. The music they made was not random noise, but deliberate, practiced, and beautiful, suggesting a society where music was already woven into the rhythms of life. Imagine the sound, pure, haunting, rising and falling in the echoing chambers of the cave, mingling with the voices of the group. Each note would have shimmered in the air, fading slowly as it bounced from stone to stone, a song for spirits, for ancestors, for the living and the yet to come. Flutes, however, were only the beginning. Early humans were surrounded by a world filled with rhythm, and almost anything could become an instrument. Consider the bull roarer, a simple device made from a flat piece of bone or wood attached to a string, and spun rapidly in circles. As it moves, it creates a low, eerie hum that can travel for great distances. Used in ceremonies and possibly for signaling, the bull roarer speaks to an understanding of sound that is both functional and mysterious. Its tones, at once otherworldly and primal, blur the line between music and magic, between message and art. And then there are the drums, arguably the most elemental of all instruments. With a taut animal hide stretched over a hollowed log or a frame of bone, the first drums captured the heartbeat of the world, transforming it into a language of thunder and anticipation. These were not the refined drums of later times, but rough, handmade tools, powerful enough to unite a group in dance or ritual. The beat of a drum could summon the group together, mark the turning of the seasons, or set the pace for a communal work. Even today, the pulse of the drum remains at the core of our musical traditions, a direct line back to those first gatherings beneath the ancient stars. Not all instruments were so obviously crafted. Some grew out of daily necessity. The twang of a bowstring, the rattle of shells strung together, the rhythmic tapping of stones. In many ways, the world itself was the first orchestra, and the musicians were those willing to listen closely, to coax music from whatever was at hand. It's easy to imagine a moment when a hunter, resting beside a river, idly plucked at the string of his bow and discovered an unexpected melody. Or when a group of children began to clap and stomp, their laughter blending into the kind of spontaneous music that would have brightened the darkest night. Every discovery, every fragment, tells a story not just of survival, but of wonder. The oldest instruments are a testament to creativity in its purest form, a drive not merely to exist, but to communicate, to connect, to express feelings that words could not contain. Their music was shaped by the world around them, the howl of wind through a canyon, the rhythm of feet on stone, the call and response between voice and echo. Over thousands of years, these instruments would evolve, growing in complexity and beauty, but always retaining the spark of that first, daring note. So, when we look at these ancient relics, the flute carved from the wing of a vulture, the drum that once trembled with the beat of many hands, the bull roarer singing its secrets to the wind, we are witnessing the birth of something uniquely human. Music, it seems, was always there, waiting to be discovered, quietly calling us to listen, to remember, and to dream. There is a moment, stepping from the pale light of the outside world into the heart of a cave, when the rules of ordinary life seem to melt away. The air cools and thickens, scents of earth and mineral rise around you, and every sound, your breath, your footsteps, becomes deeper, more alive. These underground worlds, carved over eons by water and time, became far more than simple shelters. For our ancestors, they were the first cathedrals, sacred spaces that transformed the act of making music into something transcendent, unforgettable. Why did early humans choose caves for their most important rituals and celebrations, turning these natural spaces into the world's earliest concert halls? The answer, in part, lies in the extraordinary acoustics hidden within the stone. In the darkness, even the faintest sound travels and grows, bouncing from wall to wall, folding over itself in endless echoes. A single voice can swell to fill an entire chamber. A drum beat can ripple like thunder. And the simplest melody can become a living, breathing presence that seems to come from everywhere at once. Scientists studying these ancient sites have discovered that many of the most beautifully decorated caves are also the ones with the most remarkable sound properties. These were not random choices. The people who gathered here understood, perhaps instinctively, perhaps through years of experience, that the cave could become an instrument, shaping and magnifying every note and rhythm. In some places, a shout or song will bounce back in haunting waves, creating harmonies no single person could make alone. In others, a drum beat can be felt through your bones, the vibration traveling not just through air, but through the very floor beneath your feet. Imagine a group gathered in a great stone chamber, deep beneath the surface of the earth. The flicker of firelight turns painted figures into dancers, shadows swirling with every movement. The musicians, if that word can capture their role, take their places. Perhaps one begins with a gentle tapping, another lifts a flute to their lips, a third hums a melody that rises, blends, and transforms in the living architecture of the cave. The sound swells and returns, multiplied and enriched by the curved ceilings and hidden alcoves. In this darkness, with vision limited and the senses heightened, the experience of music becomes overwhelming. More than just hearing, it is feeling, immersion, surrender. Caves offered a perfect blend of intimacy and mystery. The journey into the earth was itself a passage from the everyday to the extraordinary. Once inside, people left behind the world of sunlight, hunger, and danger. Here, they entered a space where boundaries seemed to dissolve, where the spirit could stretch beyond the limits of the body. The rituals performed in these depths, singing, dancing, painting, drumming, became moments of transformation, times when community and individual merged, when the concerns of the present faded before something older and deeper. The cave was not just a backdrop for these activities, but an active participant. The acoustics made each event larger than life, turning music into an encounter with the unknown. It is no accident that in many cultures, caves have been seen as places of origin and rebirth, of connection to ancestors and hidden forces. The echoing halls became a bridge between worlds, the world of the living and the world of the spirits, the visible and the invisible. In the depths, music and magic became one and the same, each feeding and amplifying the other. Today, when scientists recreate the sounds of ancient instruments within these very caves, they are often astonished by the power and clarity of the result. A bone flute, played outside, may sound thin and tentative, but in the cave, it takes on a haunting, ethereal quality. The drum beat is no longer a simple noise, but a pulse that fills the darkness, commanding attention, inviting participation. Even a single human voice, raised in song or chant, can become unrecognizable, larger, more mysterious, charged with emotion and presence. This transformation was not lost on the people who first entered these spaces. The choice of the cave as a concert hall was as much about emotion as about acoustics. Here, the community could gather, surrounded by ancient paintings and the comforting presence of stone, to share in rituals that gave meaning to their lives. The music they made was woven into the fabric of the place, a reminder that, even in the depths of the earth, the human urge to create, to connect, to reach for something beyond was as strong as ever. In these hidden chambers, music became more than entertainment. It was an act of belonging, a shared heartbeat in the darkness, a promise that, no matter how wild and uncertain the world outside, something unbreakable linked them all together, a melody that would echo long after the last note faded into silence. Close your eyes and imagine, just for a moment, the soundscape of a world untouched by cities, engines, or electronic noise. The only music you know is the one you make with your own body, the things you find around you, and the world itself. A world brimming with wind through grass, the rush of water in dark rivers, the crackle of fire, and the distant howls and calls of animals unseen. This was the sonic environment of the earliest humans, and it is here that the first music was born, not as a polished composition, but as an echo of the natural world, woven seamlessly into daily life. So what might that first music have sounded like? It was likely nothing like the complex melodies we know today, and yet it was no less powerful. The first musicians, children, parents, elders, listened to the rhythms and patterns all around them and began to mimic and transform them. The rustle of leaves became a gentle tapping on stone. The whistle of wind was reimagined through lips pursed in imitation. The booming of thunder was echoed in the pounding of hands against hollow logs or stretched animal hides. These were sounds everyone understood, sounds that connected them to the world, to each other, and to something greater. Vocalization was at the very heart of this musical awakening. Before the invention of words as we know them, people used their voices in ways both playful and profound. A mother might coo to her child, inventing a melody as unique as a fingerprint. Hunters, crouched in silence, might mimic the calls of birds or the bark of a distant predator, both to communicate and to blend into the environment. Gathered around a fire, the group could break into chants, short, looping phrases, perhaps without fixed meaning, but full of feeling. These chants could rise and fall, faster or slower, louder or softer, mirroring the energy of the group and the mood of the moment. Rhythm was the anchor, the heartbeat around which these early musical expressions revolved. With hands, feet, sticks, or stones, people created repeating patterns that were easy to remember and join. Rhythm became the language of unity, a simple, irresistible invitation for everyone to participate. The beat might start with a single person tapping, but soon others would join, until the cave itself was pulsing with a collective energy. Even without instruments, the body itself became a drum. Clapping, stomping, slapping thighs and chests, clicking tongues, all merging into a tapestry of sound. Imitation was not just for communication or fun, it was a way to honor and understand the world. The howls of wolves, the rhythmic hoot of an owl, the scampering of small creatures, all could find their place in the emerging vocabulary of music. By mimicking the sounds of the environment, early humans felt less isolated, more connected, as if joining in a grand conversation with everything around them. The line between music and magic was thin. To imitate a powerful animal might be to borrow its strength. To sing like the wind could be to call for its favor. Sometimes music was spontaneous, bubbling up in moments of joy or relief, after a successful hunt, at the return of spring, or simply in the company of others. At other times, it was deliberate, ritualized, designed to mark important events or to call upon unseen forces for help and protection. In either case, the sounds made were deeply meaningful, even if their purpose was not always consciously understood. A simple melody could soothe a child, strengthen a group, or summon the courage to face an uncertain world. What's striking about these first attempts at music is their communal nature. This was not art created for an audience, but for the group, for the moment, for the experience itself. No one stood apart as a performer. Everyone was welcome. Everyone's voice or beat was valued. In the darkness of the cave, or beneath a sky of endless stars, the line between individual and group blurred. Music became the heartbeat of community.
Modern experiments offer glimpses into how these sounds might have felt. Researchers gather in caves with replicas of ancient flutes or drums and try to recreate what once was. They discover that certain rhythms feel almost universal, that simple pentatonic scales or repetitive motifs seem to resonate with everyone. The echoes of a single note, the slow build of a communal chant, the thrill of sound swelling and merging, these are experiences as old as humanity itself. And so, the first music was a living, breathing thing, wild, communal, deeply tied to the earth and to the moment. It was made with whatever was at hand: bone, stone, skin, voice, and imagination. It spoke of the world as it was, as it might be, and as its makers hoped it would become. Even now, if you listen closely to the wind, to the night, to the gentle hum of life, you might hear something of that ancient song. A reminder that the first music never truly vanished, but still echoes within us all. In the earliest days of music, the world itself was a vast, untamed orchestra, waiting for curious hands to explore its possibilities. For our distant ancestors, there were no factories or marketplaces from which to purchase instruments. Every sound was born from what the earth provided. Every note coaxed from objects that served a dozen other purposes before becoming part of a song. To reconstruct those first instruments is to look at the landscape through ancient eyes, seeing not just a river stone or a fallen branch, but a potential voice in the great ongoing symphony of life. Stone was perhaps the most primal instrument, both for its durability and its abundance. When two stones are struck together, they ring with a clear, penetrating tone that can cut through the stillness of even the deepest cave. In some places, people discovered lithophones, large flat rocks carefully arranged or chosen for their musical qualities. When tapped with smaller stones, these ancient xylophones could produce a surprising range of notes, each one resonating with the memory of water and time. Even today, such stones, often scarred by the repeated blows of hands long vanished, still sing when awakened, carrying the echo of an age when music was as much about touch as sound. Bones, too, played a vital role in this early orchestra. The remains of hunted animals, especially birds and large mammals, were shaped into flutes and whistles, their hollow forms ideal for creating breathy, haunting melodies. The selection of bone was not accidental. Bird bones are naturally hollow, strong yet light, and can be drilled or notched with sharp tools. Some of the oldest instruments ever found are these bone flutes, meticulously carved and surprisingly sophisticated, their surfaces smoothed by countless fingers.
The very act of transforming something left behind by nature into a vessel for music speaks to a deep sense of resourcefulness and reverence, a willingness to see potential in the most unlikely materials. Wood, while less likely to survive the passage of millennia, must have been equally treasured. Branches could be hollowed out to form simple pipes, or bent and strung to create the earliest musical bows, precursors to both the stringed instruments and hunting weapons of later times. The sound of a plucked string, vibrating between 2 points, would have been a source of fascination and delight, a new way to explore the invisible world of vibration and resonance. Bark, roots, and even leaves could be fashioned into rattles or drums, amplifying the rhythms already alive in every heart. Shells, seeds, and nutshells became natural rattles, filled and shaken to create complex textures of sound. Animal hides, stretched over hollow logs or earthen vessels, provided the basis for early drums, percussion instruments that could drive a group to dance or mark the rhythms of a ritual. Even simple items like sticks, when scraped together or against a ribbed surface, created sharp, insistent sounds, perfect for marking time or signaling across distance. It is no accident that the instruments which have come down to us are those made of the most resilient materials: stone, bone, ivory. Wood and hide, being organic, usually vanish over centuries, unless perfectly preserved by chance. This is why our glimpses into the musical past often come in the form of flutes, whistles, or percussive stones. Their forms changed, but their voices not entirely silenced. They are survivors of a world that is mostly lost, clues left behind for us to piece together the soundtrack of ancient lives. Yet the materials themselves tell a story. Stone and bone could last for ages, but they also speak of a people deeply attuned to the cycles of life and death, resourcefulness and renewal. Nothing was wasted. Each object served its purpose, then was given new meaning in the act of creation. To play a song on a bone flute was to honor the life of the animal, to let its spirit dance once more in the air. To drum on a hollow log was to summon the pulse of the forest itself. Every artifact that survives is more than just a relic. It is a bridge to a time when the boundaries between nature and culture, necessity and imagination were thin and flexible. The first instruments were not merely tools. They were companions, storytellers, and witnesses, each note carrying the hopes and fears of a people who saw the world not as silent but as alive with possibilities, ready to join their voices in the endless, echoing chorus of creation. Somewhere in the shadows of prehistory, a rhythm began, a steady pulse tapping out against stone, skin, or wood, rising above the quiet murmur of the night. Before there were melodies or even true songs, there was rhythm. It was the first universal language, the heartbeat that echoed through every cave, every clearing, every gathering of people seeking warmth, security, and connection. Its power lay not just in sound, but in its ability to unite, to communicate across distance and difference, to anchor the most profound moments of ancient life. Rhythm was everywhere, in the footfalls of a hunting party moving as one through the undergrowth, in the gentle rocking of a child in its mother's arms, in the pulsing of blood, the thrum of rain on leaves, the cyclical crashing of waves, the changing of the seasons. The world itself seemed to move to a beat, and our ancestors, attuned to these patterns, brought them into their own lives in ways both instinctive and intentional. For communication, rhythm offered clarity and immediacy. When words were few or still developing, a series of beats could signal danger, call the group together, or coordinate a hunt. The difference between a frantic, uneven pounding and a slow, deliberate sequence was as clear as any spoken warning or invitation. Across open fields or dense forests, the drum or the rattle, amplified by many hands or by the echoing stone, could carry much farther than a shout. In the uncertain dark, the rhythmic beat was reassurance, a signal that others were near, alert, and ready. But rhythm was not only for survival, it was for belonging. When the group gathered, around a fire, in a cave, beneath the stars, the first beat would often come quietly, a tentative tap or clap, testing the air. Then, gradually, others joined in, matching or answering, turning solitary impulses into something shared. The magic of rhythm is its inclusiveness. Unlike melody, which might require practice or special skill, rhythm is for everyone. A child can stomp, an elder can clap, a hunter can strike stone against stone. All can contribute, and all can feel the pulse coursing through the group. In ritual, rhythm took on an even deeper meaning. Ceremonies marking the hunt, the changing moon, the birth of a child, or the hope for rain all found structure and focus in the repetitive, hypnotic patterns of drums, rattles, or body percussion. The beat grounded participants, quieted fear, and lifted spirits. It could induce trance, open the mind to visions, or simply provide comfort and joy. Sometimes the rhythm became so intense, so immersive, that it seemed to dissolve the boundary between the individual and the group, binding everyone into a single breathing organism. In these moments, time itself felt different, measured not by hours or days, but by the cycles of sound and silence, tension and release. Rhythm's power endures because it is simple, elemental, and immediately accessible. It does not need to be explained. It is felt first in the body, then in the mind. In the ancient world, this was a lifeline, a way to keep the group moving as one, to celebrate and mourn, to mark the endless dance of survival. Even as instruments grew more complex and music evolved into new forms, the fundamental human need for rhythm remained unchanged. It was the signal fire on a distant hill, the heartbeat in the dark, the quiet reassurance that, even in the vast silence of the unknown, no one was truly alone. That primal beat, the first music, lives on in every culture and every era. It is why we tap our feet without thinking, why we sway to the pulse of a song, why a simple drum beat can bring a stadium of strangers together in a single, thundering moment of unity. It is the oldest part of the human song, the bridge across time that reminds us, long before words or melody, we listened, we felt, and we moved together to the rhythm of the world. In the flicker of firelight, deep inside the echoing chambers of a cave, music often became something more than mere entertainment. It slipped quietly into the realm of magic. For ancient peoples, sound and rhythm were not just background to their lives, but powerful forces shaping experience and belief, bridging the worlds of the seen and the unseen. Why did early humans make music, especially in the heart of darkness? Pleasure was certainly a part of it. The thrill of creating something beautiful, the joy of joining together in dance and song, the relief of laughter and shared experience after a day of danger or hunger. But for many, music held meanings deeper and more mysterious, touching realms of fear, faith, and even the desire for power over the unknown. Imagine the group assembled as night presses in, the air thick with anticipation. A drum beat begins, slow, deliberate, echoing through stone. A flute joins in, its high, wavering notes weaving between shadows. The voices rise in unison, chanting syllables whose meanings are half remembered, half invented, their power rooted more in sound than in sense. Someone moves to the center, masked and painted, their steps following the rhythm, feet scattering sparks from the fire. The music grows, building in layers, until the ordinary world seems to fall away. In this heightened state, every sound gains importance. A chant is not just a melody, but a spell. The repetition of a phrase or rhythm, the swaying of bodies, the collective focus, these are not simply for fun, but are acts of intent. The ancient mind, alive with imagination and hunger, believed in the thinness of the veil between worlds. The right song, played in the right place, might summon rain or ward off illness, might call the spirits of ancestors or drive away unseen dangers lurking beyond the firelight. Music and magic were closely entwined. To sing or play was to make a request, to offer thanks, or to plead for guidance. The beat of the drum could mimic the heartbeat of the earth. The whistle of a flute might imitate the call of a sacred animal. The rattle of bones could awaken memories of past hunts or lost friends. Some rituals were meant to ensure a successful hunt, to protect a newborn, or to honor the passage of a loved one. Others were secret, reserved for moments when fear pressed tight and hope flickered uncertainly. In these times, music was both shield and sword, a way to control what could not be understood. Around the fire, dance became a ritual in itself. Patterns of movement mirrored the patterns of sound, tracing invisible lines of power across the cave floor. Bodies swayed, jumped, and spun, marking the ground with steps as old as humanity. Sometimes the dance was a communal expression, everyone joining the circle, hands linked, voices merging into a single unwavering song. Other times, a chosen few took the center, channeling forces that others could only witness. Shamans, storytellers, those believed to stand closer to the spirit world.
The sensation of being swept up in a collective trance, hearts pounding, breath quickening, the world blurring into a whirl of color and sound, was both frightening and exhilarating. In these moments, music was not just a human creation, but a force of nature, something wild and uncontrollable. It gave courage, banished loneliness, and offered a fleeting sense of mastery over a world that was mostly unpredictable and often unforgiving. Even now, as archaeologists and researchers try to reconstruct these secret rites, much remains unknown. The songs themselves have faded, their words lost to time, but the marks they left, in the charred bones, the painted walls, the careful placement of objects, still speak of moments when music was magic, and magic was music. The impulse that drew ancient people together around the fire still lives on in every festival, every gathering, every moment when we surrender to the power of sound and movement. Music is not just a memory of the past, it is the lingering breath of those secret rituals, whispering that, beneath the surface of the everyday, the world is still alive with possibility, mystery, and the promise of transformation. Long before temples rose from stone or prayers were written on parchment, music was already a vessel for faith, a way to reach beyond the boundaries of the visible world and touch something sacred, mysterious, and immense. In the shadowy depths of caves, long before the birth of organized religion, the first songs were more than simple entertainment. They were offerings, invocations,
bridges flung out across the darkness to find meaning, protection, and connection with unseen powers. Imagine a small group gathered as night deepens, their faces lit by a trembling fire. The air feels charged, every sound magnified by stone and silence. Into this space, a single note rises, perhaps the voice of an elder or the steady rhythm of a drum. It is not casual. This music is ritual, its structure and repetition giving shape to hope and fear, longing and gratitude. The melody may be simple, a rising chant, a repeated phrase, but each note is weighted with intent. This is not just song, it is prayer. In this ancient world, the boundary between music and worship was blurred. The first shamans, those strange and gifted figures who stood at the threshold of the spirit world, used music to enter altered states, to call upon ancestors, to guide the living and honor the departed. Their voices, sometimes trembling, sometimes fierce, could travel across the limits of the ordinary, carrying the needs of the tribe to forces beyond their understanding. The drum was their heartbeat, the flute their whisper, the chant their bridge between earth and sky. Music gave structure to rituals, marking beginnings and endings, seasons and cycles, the safe passage of a child into the world or a hunter's return from the wild. It was both personal and communal, a way for individuals to find solace and strength, and for groups to come together in shared purpose. Sometimes songs were meant to soothe, to calm a restless spirit, a frightened child, a heart heavy with grief. Other times they called for action, a plea for rain, a blessing for the hunt, a warning to the forces believed to dwell just beyond the light. Every sound, every rhythm was chosen with care. Certain melodies were reserved for sacred moments, certain beats for particular ceremonies. Some songs were passed down through generations, their origins forgotten, but their power undiminished. The singers became custodians of memory and meaning, trusted not only with the act of making music, but with holding the fragile thread that tied the present to the past and the earthly to the divine. The cave itself played its part, a holy place, a natural cathedral shaped by time, its walls painted with visions and dreams. Within these chambers, music became a form of language that spoke when ordinary words fell short. The echoes were not empty. They returned, each sound transformed, as if the spirits themselves were singing back. In the darkness, it was easy to believe that every song was heard, every plea considered, every moment of gratitude or fear lifted beyond the world of flesh and stone. As the first religious traditions took shape, music remained at their heart. It was the tool of the priest and the shaman, the thread binding community to cosmos, the ancient pulse that promised connection, comfort, and hope. Even now, the most sacred rituals, whether whispered alone in the night or thundered by thousands in chorus, draw upon those earliest songs, those first prayers offered to the silence. In every chant, every hymn, every trembling note that seeks to reach the divine, we hear an echo of those beginnings, when music and faith were one, and every song was a bridge to the unknown. The most ancient of all instruments was, and remains, the human voice, a living, breathing source of sound as flexible as imagination itself. In the time before language was fixed, before instruments became a craft, the voice was both the storyteller and the song, the alarm and the lullaby. It shaped the earliest music not just as melody, but as a raw force, a tool for communication, emotion, and survival. Imagine the cave at night. The group gathered, their faces painted by firelight. every sense tuned to the shifting world beyond. Into this hush, a voice breaks, a shout that echoes off the stone, bold and urgent. Such cries were music of necessity, piercing through the dark to signal danger, summon help, or rally others. But not all sounds were born of fear. The human voice could also mimic the low growl of a bear, the distant call of a wolf, the trilling of birds hidden in the morning mist. By imitating the world around them, people became part of it, borrowing the power of animals and the grace of the forest, learning not just to survive, but to belong. As groups grew, so did the ways voices could blend. Early humans discovered the thrill of joining together, layering shouts, hums, and melodic fragments into a living tapestry of sound. This was the birth of chorus, a unity of voices that was at once grounding and uplifting. To chant as one was to feel the strength of many inside you, to dissolve into something larger and more enduring. These group songs might start with a single line, repeated and gradually picked up by others, rising and falling like waves. The simplest patterns, once repeated, could become hypnotic, a shared pulse that wove the community into a single living organism. Melody itself was a revelation, a discovery that voices could rise and fall, tracing arcs in the air that words alone could never reach. Lullabies soothed restless children, melodic calls drew people together across distance, and wordless tunes expressed hope or grief or gratitude without need for explanation. A mother might invent a tune for her child, passing it down through the years until it became a familiar comfort to every generation. Elders could mark time and tradition with songs that remembered victories, mourned losses, or celebrated the return of spring. In ritual, the voice was even more powerful. Chants and drones, sometimes wordless, sometimes filled with sacred syllables, gave structure to ceremonies, opening the way for trance, vision, or healing. In the hands of shamans or priests, the voice became a bridge to other worlds, its timbre shifting from fierce to gentle, harsh to sweet, echoing through the caves and out into the star-filled night. When many voices joined, the result was more than the sum of its parts. Harmonies formed, even if by accident, and overtones shimmered in the stone, multiplying the effect until it felt as if the very air were alive with presence. Even today, we recognize the primal thrill of the unaccompanied voice, the way a simple song can fill a space, unite strangers, or bring comfort in the darkest hour. In every language and culture, voices join in laughter, lament, and celebration, reaching back to those first tentative sounds in the ancient caves. The voice is the memory of the past, improvising, blending, calling out, and answering back, forever echoing the earliest music humanity ever knew. In the great sweep of the prehistoric world, music and survival were not distant cousins but close allies, each shaping the other in ways both subtle and profound. For the first hunters, sound was a double-edged tool, something that could spell doom if carelessly made, or become a secret weapon when harnessed with purpose and cunning. The bond between music and the art of the hunt was born of necessity, ingenuity, and a keen awareness of the living tapestry all around. Picture a silent morning on the open steppe, mist hugging the ground as a small hunting group moves through grass and shadow. Here, every sound matters. The snap of a twig could send prey running. A sudden shout might scatter the herd. Hunters learned to move as one, communicating with a language of carefully crafted signals. A bird-like whistle from behind a boulder, a rhythmic tap of stick on stone, the brief, urgent rustle that meant wait or move or danger. These weren't just random noises. They were designed to blend with the soundscape, to borrow the voices of nature and hide the presence of humans within it. Inside the echoing dark of a cave, sound became even more crucial. When hunting or exploring in total darkness, with vision reduced to little more than instinct, early people relied on the bounce and clarity of noises to navigate, regroup, or alert one another to threats. A distinctive call, a knock on rock, a series of claps. Each could guide others back to safety or signal the start of a planned movement. In these moments, music and communication were indistinguishable. Both were strategies for making sense of the unknown and staying alive. But sound wasn't only about secrecy or command. Sometimes music became a tool of disguise, a means to trick both prey and rival hunters. Imitating the call of a wounded animal, the flutter of a startled bird, or the slow, rhythmic crunch of a grazing herd could draw animals closer, buying precious seconds for the group to act. Children learned these tricks from their elders, mastering the subtle art of mimicry long before they mastered the hunt itself. These skills became woven into stories and songs, passed down with pride and refined with every generation. Yet even in the act of survival, music found space for celebration. After the chase was over, when meat was roasting and the group gathered in the safety of the firelight, the sounds of the hunt transformed into songs, melodies and rhythms that told of bravery, cleverness, and luck. Hunters might stamp out the rhythm of the chase, voices rising in victory and relief. The retelling of the day's adventure was punctuated with mimicked cries, celebratory chants, and sometimes playful teasing, each sound a thread in the fabric of community. Ritual and practicality often overlapped. Before a big hunt, rhythmic songs or dances might be performed to prepare both mind and body, to summon confidence or call for the blessing of the spirits believed to watch over the wild. These rituals, repeated year after year, slowly became traditions, shared music that reminded everyone of their place in the world, their dependence on one another, and their respect for the animals and lands that sustained them. The connection between music and the hunt shaped not just how early humans survived, but how they remembered, learned, and grew. In every clever signal, every triumphant song, every whispered warning or joyful shout, the rhythms of survival echoed through the ages. What began as a necessity became a form of art, a means of forging bonds, passing down wisdom, and giving thanks for the chance to live and sing another day. And in that ongoing dance between silence and sound, between hiding and revealing, the earliest music of humanity was born, a music forever intertwined with the story of survival. As dusk surrendered to the deep blackness of night, the fire's glow became the center of an ancient universe, a warm, flickering heart around which the entire community gathered. In this circle, beneath the endless sky, or hidden in the shelter of the cave, music and dance came alive as the very lifeblood of collective existence. Here, the ordinary troubles of the day faded into the background, and every soul was drawn into something greater, something unspoken but deeply felt. It began with a single, steady beat, maybe a hand drumming on a stretched hide, or the rhythmic striking of stone on stone. Soon, others joined, clapping, stamping, voices rising in laughter or in chant. The boundaries between individuals dissolved. Even those too shy or tired to speak found themselves swept along by the irresistible current, feeling the music pulse in their bodies and bones. Dance followed almost inevitably, bodies swaying and circling the fire, feet tracing ancient patterns across the earth. There was no script, no leader, just the joy of moving together, guided by rhythm and instinct. This was more than simple amusement. The collective music making and dance served as the glue that bound the tribe. In a world of constant uncertainty, where danger might lurk beyond the light and tomorrow was never promised, these shared rituals created a sense of belonging that was as vital as food or shelter. As hands joined, voices mingled, and shadows danced on the cave walls, each person felt the power of community, the knowledge that they were not alone. For the young, the fire circle was a place of learning and initiation. Children watched, mimicked, and gradually joined the dance, absorbing the rhythms and stories that shaped their world. Elders taught the subtle changes in beat that marked different occasions, celebrations, memorials, times of hope or mourning. Even the smallest could stamp, clap, or hum, and in doing so, they learned what it meant to be part of something enduring and resilient. At times, the music and dance around the fire helped the group face fears too large to name. On stormy nights when the wind howled and unseen things crept at the edge of darkness, the communal beat was a shield against loneliness and dread. Songs could banish anxiety, laughter could reclaim the night, and movement could turn trembling into confidence. By acting as one, moving, singing, and celebrating together, the group transformed fear into strength, isolation into togetherness. These gatherings also gave rise to stories. The retelling of the day's triumphs and hardships, spun into song and dance so they would not be forgotten. Victories on the hunt, narrow escapes, the wonders of the changing seasons, all became part of the ever-growing oral tradition. Music was the memory of the tribe, the language through which values, lessons, and histories were passed down, strengthened by the emotional power of shared experience. In those moments when every foot beat the ground in time, when every heart seemed to thump in unison with the drum, the tribe became more than just a collection of individuals. It became a living, breathing whole, united in purpose, hope, and imagination. The fire, the music, and the dance stitched invisible threads through every soul, tying them not just to one another, but to all who had come before and all who would come after. This ritual of gathering, making music, and moving as one remains one of humanity's most enduring gifts. In every festival, every circle dance, every chorus rising together in song, we hear echoes of those first nights around the fire, when music was not a performance but a way of being, a promise that no matter how dark the world became, we could always find our way home to one another, to warmth, to belonging. As generations passed and the world slowly shifted, the confines of the cave, once a place of safety, magic, and echoing music, became only the beginning of a far grander stage. The old rituals did not vanish. Instead, they followed people into the open air, expanding as the tribe's sense of space and possibility grew. With every sunrise over sweeping plains and every gathering beneath the wide starlit sky, music began to transform, carrying the lessons of darkness into the brilliance of dawn. Stepping out from the shadowed mouth of the cave, the first musicians found themselves in a world alive with new acoustics and endless possibilities. The natural amphitheaters of valleys, rocky outcrops, and forest clearings became the new venues for sound. Here, the music was unbound, free to mingle with the whispering wind, the chorus of birds, and the distant rumble of storms. Voices soared without the close echoes of stone, and the rhythms of drums and feet carried farther, calling listeners from every direction. The act of making music was no longer hidden, no longer reserved for the initiated. It became a celebration of the open world, an invitation to all. This was the dawn of communal gatherings that stretched far beyond the family or clan. Groups from neighboring valleys or distant encampments met in times of abundance, following the movements of animals or the ripening of fruit, and music became the shared language between strangers. Songs were traded, rhythms borrowed, dances taught and remade under the open sky. Each meeting brought fresh ideas, new instruments, and a blending of traditions. The earliest musical competitions may have begun here. Friendly challenges to see who could drum the longest, sing the loudest, invent the most captivating melody. Victory was measured not just in skill, but in the laughter, applause, and the stories told long after the notes faded.
As the gatherings grew, so did the sophistication of musical performance. Some songs were composed specifically for these occasions, celebrating a successful hunt, honoring a visiting guest, or giving thanks for the first rains. The music evolved from spontaneous jam sessions into more structured performances, with individuals or small groups taking the lead while others watched, clapped, and joined in at key moments. The earliest hints of audience and performer, of stage and spectacle, began to take shape, sowing the seeds for everything from folk festivals to grand ceremonies of the future. With music now out in the open, its role shifted and expanded. It became a tool for diplomacy, for building trust and alliances between different groups. Shared dances could turn rivals into friends. The exchange of songs became a form of truce, a sign of goodwill and respect. The act of making music together, of matching rhythms, blending voices, learning each other's melodies, created new bonds and new possibilities for cooperation. The move outside also changed the music itself. Surrounded by birdsong and wind, by the rhythmic pulse of rain and the symphony of nighttime insects, humans began to weave these sounds into their own compositions. Instruments grew louder, sturdier, able to fill the open air. Chants became more varied, dances more exuberant, as the boundaries of what was possible expanded with each performance. Music became a living map, marking the passage of seasons, the migrations of people and animals, the cycles of planting and harvest. In time, these open-air gatherings laid the foundation for the world's first festivals, where music, dance, and story were braided into a single celebration of life's abundance. Even as villages, towns, and cities rose, the spirit of these early performances endured, passed down in every marketplace song, every wedding dance, every contest of skill and creativity. The music that had once filled the depths of the earth now rang out beneath the sun and stars, carrying with it the memory of caves and fires and the first dreams of what it meant to be human. In every open field where people gather to make music, there remains a whisper of that ancient moment, the dawn when song stepped into the light and the world itself became the stage. In the living web of prehistoric life, music was not the preserve of a chosen few. It belonged to everyone, women, men, children, elders, each contributing their own voices, rhythms, and ideas to the soundscape of the community. The cave and the clearing, the fireside and the open meadow all became stages for the most inclusive art form our species has ever known. If music was a thread that bound the tribe, then women and children were its quiet, tireless weavers, shaping the soundtrack of daily life in ways both visible and hidden. Women were often the keepers of the home, the guardians of tradition, and the first musicians a child ever heard. Their voices carried lullabies, those gentle melodies that floated through the air and soothed restless infants, comforting them in the darkness. These songs, improvised, borrowed, and endlessly repeated, became a kind of oral heartbeat,
passed from mother to child generation after generation. In the earliest music, there was no sharp divide between sacred and ordinary, between ritual and routine. The simple act of singing a baby to sleep or humming while grinding grain was as much a part of the musical world as any great gathering or communal dance. Children, for their part, were not mere spectators. They were eager participants, quick to clap, stomp, whistle, and mimic the sounds of animals or the rhythms of the adults. Childhood games revolved around sound. Guessing games with animal calls, competitions to see who could drum the fastest, or quiet moments inventing new songs while playing in the dust. Through play, children learned the rules of rhythm and harmony, practiced coordination, and absorbed the music of their community without the need for formal instruction. Sometimes, their spontaneous tunes would catch the ears of adults, who might weave those playful melodies into more formal rituals or celebrations. The presence of women and children in the heart of music making meant that sound was everywhere and always. The rhythms of work, pounding grain, weaving, preparing food, were often set to song, turning labor into something communal and even joyful. The laughter and shrieks of children became their own kind of percussion, blending with the background hum of village life. In this way, music softened hardship and transformed routine, binding everyone together in a cycle of participation and memory. Certain rituals and ceremonies held special places for women's voices. Some songs were reserved for blessings or farewells, others for healing or marking the passage of the seasons. Women might lead the chorus at weddings or celebrations of new life, their voices setting the tone for joy or solace. In times of trouble, it was often the mothers and grandmothers who would sing to steady nerves to remind everyone of continuity and hope. Music gave these moments a structure, an order, a reassurance that even in uncertainty, there were things that could be shared and relied upon. Certain rituals and ceremonies held special places for women's voices. Some songs were reserved for blessings or farewells, others for healing or marking the passage of the seasons. Women might lead the chorus at weddings or celebrations of new life, their voices setting the tone for joy or solace. In times of trouble, it was often the mothers and grandmothers who would sing to steady nerves to remind everyone of continuity and hope. Music gave these moments a structure, an order, a reassurance that even in uncertainty, there were things that could be shared and relied upon. As societies grew more complex, the role of women and children in music making sometimes shifted, but the memory of their contribution endured. The first lullabies, the playful calls and chants of youth, the communal songs of work and celebration, these became the seeds from which all later music would grow. In every culture, the echoes remain. The soft song at bedtime, the childish hum of invention, the chorus of many voices rising in celebration or comfort. In this ancient chorus, every voice was welcome. The creation and sharing of music was not the privilege of specialists or the strong, but the right and gift of all. Even as the centuries passed and traditions changed, the foundation laid by women and children continued to sustain the heart of music, keeping it alive as the most universal, generous, and enduring expression of what it means to be human. In a world without writing, where stories lived only in the mind and memory was as precious as fire, music survived by moving from person to person, heart to heart, generation to generation. There were no sheets of notation, no recorded songs to play back and imitate exactly. Instead, every melody was a living thing, shaped and reshaped by each singer, each listener, as it traveled through time. The tradition of music was as fluid and resilient as the people who carried it, held together by the threads of memory, imitation, and the simple, irresistible urge to share. The act of learning music began with listening. Children absorbed the sounds of their community from their earliest days. Songs that floated through daily chores, chants that marked the start and end of communal work, lullabies at dusk, and the distant thump of drums during celebrations. Without thinking, they memorized the tunes, the rhythms, the ways a certain phrase might rise or fall, the moments when voices merged or parted. Imitation was the first teacher. A child would mimic the hums and whistles of the adults, slowly gaining skill, confidence, and a repertoire of sounds that became the foundation for creative play.
Rituals and communal gatherings reinforced this oral tradition. Certain songs belonged to certain moment, an ancient call that signaled the beginning of a hunt, a haunting melody for morning, a joyous chant for the first fruits of spring. Each event brought the tribe together, and music became a shared script, rehearsed not by reading, but by repeated performance. The elders led, the youth echoed. The group as a whole built a memory that was both collective and individual. Mistakes became variations, and sometimes a misremembered tune would catch on, giving birth to a new version that gradually replaced the old. Imitation went beyond melody. It included gesture, rhythm, and the art of blending voices. Watching and copying others was the way to mastery. A child might watch an elder shape a bone flute, learning not just the notes, but the technique, the patience, the ritual surrounding the act. The teaching was embedded in daily life, not set apart as something separate. To grow up was to absorb music the way one absorbed language, naturally, constantly, through participation and repetition. Yet not every song survived. Some melodies closely tied to a particular ritual or leader faded when those moments passed or people moved on. Songs that were easy to remember, catchy, or connected to strong emotion were more likely to endure. A melody that became part of a child's lullaby, a work chant repeated every day, or a tune that united the group in a moment of joy or sorrow, these had the power to last for centuries, even millennia. The most enduring music lived in the heart of the group, repeated so often that it became indistinguishable from memory itself. There was also a deep value placed on variation and invention. While certain songs were preserved with care, improvisation was never far from tradition. Singers added flourishes, dancers invented new steps, rhythms shifted with the seasons or the moods of the people. The oral tradition was both archive and playground, a living memory that encouraged both preservation and change. This constant interplay of imitation and creativity shaped music into something dynamic and enduring. The absence of written notes did not weaken tradition. It made it more flexible, more responsive to the needs and dreams of the community. Music lived in the act of being performed, in the voices and hands of those who cherished it, ready to adapt, to travel, to survive. And so the oldest melodies, those carried by memory, shaped by countless voices, became the roots of all later music. Their journey through time was fragile, yes, but also miraculous. The sound of one human soul reaching out to another, across years and miles, preserved not on paper or in stone, but in the living, breathing bond of shared song. The earliest songs were not only notes and rhythms, they were stories, living vessels of memory, emotion, and wonder. When voices rose in ancient times, they painted the world as vividly as any pigment on cave walls. Each melody carried a tale, and each tale was a thread woven through the collective experience of the people. In the absence of writing, these songs were the record keepers, the teachers, the comforters,
and the warning bells, transmitting everything the tribe valued, feared, or dreamed about. Animals loomed large in these early ballads, not as distant curiosities, but as constant presences, sometimes prey, sometimes rival, sometimes spirit. Songs imitated the calls of birds or the thunderous hoofbeats of a wild herd, evoking hunts both successful and failed. These melodies honored the animals that sustained life, giving thanks, asking forgiveness, or passing down hard-earned wisdom about which tracks to follow, which places to avoid. A single song might contain lessons on how to approach the river, where to hide from predators, or how to mimic the cry of a bird to move unseen through the forest. Nature itself was a central character. The wind, the rain, the flash of lightning, these forces shaped the lives of everyone, and so their stories became songs. Some melodies summoned rain in times of drought, or tried to calm the anger of a storm. Others celebrated the arrival of spring or mourned the deep silence of winter. The changing of the seasons, the return of light, the turning of the stars overhead, all were marked with music, reminders of life's cycles and the hope each new dawn brought. Fear, too, found its voice in these ancient songs. Night was thick with unknowns, and the dangers lurking in the dark, real or imagined, needed to be faced, explained, sometimes tamed. Songs told of monsters in the shadows, of spirits in the caves, of losses and near misses. To sing about fear was to share it, to make it a little smaller, to let everyone know they were not alone. Some stories, however, were told only in whispers, or sung only by certain people, keepers of dangerous knowledge or cautionary tales designed to warn rather than to entertain. These melodies held power, and with that power came respect, and sometimes a quiet sense of danger. There was joy as well, songs of laughter, play, and celebration. Melodies marked births, first steps, the safe return from a journey, or the bounty of a lucky hunt. These songs were often simple, easy to remember and join, inviting everyone to participate, to share the happiness and amplify it. Discovery was another favorite theme. A new tool, a new path, a new friend or alliance. These moments became reasons to sing, to capture the thrill of learning and the pride of progress. And then there were the songs of loss. The first time a beloved elder's voice was missing from the circle, the emptiness cried out to be filled. Music provided the words that could not be spoken, giving comfort and shape to sorrow, allowing grief to flow and heal. In mourning, as in celebration, the group became one, moving through pain together, finding hope in shared memory. The power of these stories lay not just in their content, but in their ability to travel and transform. Some songs became legends, carried from camp to camp, growing and shifting with each retelling. Others faded away, too closely tied to a place, an event, or a fear best forgotten. Occasionally, a song's subject was considered dangerous. Stories of betrayal, taboo, or forbidden love, which could stir unrest or recall old wounds. These melodies were handled with care, reserved for special times or particular voices, reminders that music could shape, protect, or even threaten the fragile fabric of the group. Yet, for all their variety, the themes of the first songs remind us of the universality of human experience. Whether about animals, weather, joy, terror, or loss, the melodies carried the same longing: to remember, to belong, to make sense of a world too vast to face alone. The stories they told, sometimes bright, sometimes dark, still echo in the songs we sing today, proof that from the very beginning, music was how we made the world our own. Around the glowing core of the communal fire, music was not just performed, it was created in real time, shaped by the hands, voices, and imaginations of everyone present. The scene was never quite the same twice. Sometimes just a few voices would start, their calls weaving through the night air. Other times, a full chorus of sound would erupt spontaneously, with drums, rattles, and flutes joining in as if summoned by a single pulse felt in every chest. These early ensembles were the laboratory of human creativity, places where experimentation and play gave birth to new sounds, new rhythms, and new ways of coming together. No one needed formal instruction to participate. The process was as natural as breathing. Perhaps one person would begin, a tap on a hollow log, a hum rising above the crackle of flames. Instinctively, others would listen, responding with their own contributions. A second voice echoing the melody, an octave higher or lower. Hands clapping a counter rhythm. A bone flute adding a quavering harmony. The instruments were as varied as the people. Stones struck together, seeds shaken in a gourd, a bowstring plucked and allowed to sing. The beauty was in the layering, the improvisation, the way the music swelled and shifted as more people found their part. The earliest ensembles had no conductors, no written scores, only the shared intuition of a group listening deeply, to each other, to the night, to the heartbeat of the earth beneath their feet. Sometimes the music became a conversation. One section would take up a pattern, building it into something hypnotic. Then another would respond, adding new colors and textures. These exchanges often gave rise to call and response structures, where a soloist would set a phrase that the group echoed or answered, allowing everyone to contribute and be heard. Rhythm was the thread that tied the ensemble together. Even the simplest repeated beat could serve as a foundation, freeing others to experiment with melody, harmony, or bursts of percussive sound. In the glow of the fire, these rhythms created a sense of safety and cohesion, a framework within which creativity could flourish. The dance between order and chaos, predictable patterns and sudden surprises, kept the group engaged and attentive, each member alert to changes and openings in the evolving sound. These experiments weren't just about making noise. They were about making meaning. Musical collaboration was a way to mark special events, to retell the stories of the day, or to call upon spirits for guidance or protection. Sometimes the music swelled into wild exuberance, with everyone leaping and shouting, instruments clattering and feet pounding the earth. Other times it softened into gentle murmurs, the ensemble dissolving into a few quiet notes before fading into silence. The rise and fall of these collective creations became a ritual in itself, a pattern as old as the tribe, as new as each night's gathering. Through these shared acts of music-making, people discovered the joy and power of ensemble. Differences in age, strength, or status faded away in the face of a common groove. Children's high voices soared above the deeper chants of elders. The tentative first notes of a beginner blended into the steady pulse of practiced hands. In this way, the group forged a unique, collective identity, each performance a fleeting but unforgettable moment of unity. And as flames flickered and stars wheeled overhead, something else emerged, a new tradition, carried forward by memory and imitation. The music born around one fire would live on, retold and reshaped at the next, always changing, always rooted in the experience of making sound together. The first ensembles gave humanity a taste of what was possible, the miracle of many voices and hands, woven into a song that belonged to everyone and no one at all, echoing far beyond the circle of the fire into the future of music itself. The journey toward music was as much about listening as about making sound. For early humans, every day was an exercise in attentive hearing, a dance with the world's wild acoustics. Survival demanded sharp ears, catching the faintest rustle of an animal, the warning click of shifting stone, the distant call of a friend or foe. But over time, this practical sensitivity grew into something more, a growing fascination with the ways sound could change, travel, and transform, especially in the unique environments our ancestors called home. From their first explorations of deep caves and high canyons, ancient people discovered that certain places had voices of their own. They noticed how a shout, a clap, or the sharp crack of stone on stone could bounce and return in surprising ways. The echo was a mystery and a marvel, a sound that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere, at once reassuring and uncanny. Some believed echoes were the responses of spirits, the voices of the ancestors answering back. For musicians and listeners alike, these phenomena became a source of endless wonder and inspiration. Caves in particular became natural laboratories for early acoustic experiments. In the flickering dark, every sound was magnified, stretched, layered. A simple hum would swirl around the chamber, returning transformed. A rhythm tapped on stone would reverberate, mingling with the noise of dripping water or the whisper of wind through narrow cracks. The cave became an instrument itself, shaping and amplifying every note. Ancient artists seemed to understand this instinctively, choosing spots for painting or ritual where the acoustics were richest, where the music could grow, echo, and linger. Learning to hear in such environments sharpened more than just the ear. It awakened a new kind of awareness. Children learned from an early age to distinguish not only the sounds of animals and weather, but the subtle differences in echo and resonance from place to place. They discovered that a song sung facing one wall would sound different if sung toward another, that a drum beat could shake the ground in one spot but vanish into silence in another. These experiments, repeated night after night, taught the tribe to listen for possibilities, to find music not just in the act of playing, but in the space around them. The physical sensations of sound were also deeply important. A strong beat in a cave could be felt through the feet and chest, vibrating in bone and air. The overlapping voices of a group chant became more than noise. They were a force, an energy, a living presence that could excite, soothe, or carry the group into trance. These effects left a mark on the imagination, blending pleasure, curiosity, and even awe. Over time, people became increasingly skilled at manipulating these effects. Musicians learned to adjust their positions, to choose materials and rhythms that would best interact with the environment. Simple melodies were repeated and refined, searching for the most resonant notes, the most pleasing patterns of echo and decay. The act of listening became an art of its own, a way of reaching out to the world and coaxing it to respond. The interplay between sound and space was not just a technical lesson. It was a gateway to creativity. The echo's return was like a call from another world, an invitation to experiment, to play, to invent new forms and rituals. The music that emerged from these spaces was shaped as much by the land as by the people, a collaboration between human intention and the ancient architecture of earth and stone. And so, through listening, careful, patient, joyful listening, our ancestors found their path from noise to music, from chaos to beauty. Every echo, every shimmer of sound in the darkness reminded them that the world itself could sing, that they were not alone, and that in the simple act of paying attention, whole new worlds of possibility could be born.
Even as millennia stretch between us and those first moments of music in the dark, the pull of ancient sound remains irresistible. Modern researchers, archaeologists, musicians, scientists, and dreamers stand at the mouth of the same caves, staring into the shadows and listening for an echo that has not faded, but merely changed form. The quest to resurrect the music of the cave people is part science, part art, and part longing, a journey to reconnect with the first pulses of rhythm and melody that shaped who we are. Across the world, this curiosity has sparked a wave of stage experiments and creative reconstructions. In the depths of European caves, musicians gather with painstaking replicas of bone flutes and ancient drums, their hands tracing the same motions as those who lived 40,000 years ago. Researchers have spent years studying the size and shape of prehistoric instruments, using 3D scans, microscopic analysis, and even DNA residue to determine what materials were used, how holes were placed, how strings or skins were stretched and tuned. The challenge is immense. So much has been lost, and every artifact is a puzzle with missing pieces. Yet the first tentative notes played on these instruments are always a revelation, haunting, unfamiliar, and yet deeply moving, as if a message had finally crossed an immense chasm of silence. The experiments go further. Acousticians and anthropologists test the echoes of ancient spaces, bringing portable speakers and sensitive microphones to record how sound moves in chambers once filled with music and ritual. They discover that certain frequencies resonate more strongly in particular caves, and that the placement of paintings often matches areas of unique acoustic richness. It seems that the first musicians not only created music, they collaborated with the landscape, turning stone and air into living partners in their art. Modern performers, inspired by these findings, have launched musical journeys into the past. Some assemble ensembles to play reconstructed instruments under the earth, letting the echoes stretch and blend as they would have thousands of years ago. Others weave together ancient melodies, vocalizations, and rhythms with electronic or world music elements, creating performances that are both tribute and reinvention. These musical expeditions are recorded, filmed, and shared across the globe, giving new audiences a taste, however faint, of what those prehistoric nights might have felt like. There is, of course, a limit to how closely we can approach the original experience. The memories, emotions, and meanings that gave birth to the first music are forever beyond our reach. Yet, the act of trying, of listening, imagining, and recreating is its own form of connection, a living echo of the need that drove our ancestors to create in the first place. Each new experiment becomes a dialogue across time, a call answered by the faint return of song. The lessons learned from these reconstructions go beyond mere curiosity. They remind us that music is not frozen in time, but always evolving, always shaped by the hands, voices, and spaces of those who make it. The ancient songs, even when imperfectly recreated, stir something universal in us, a longing for belonging, an awe before the unknown, a thrill in the act of communal creation. Perhaps that is why, standing in a darkened cave or beneath a vault of stars, a single trembling note can feel so powerful. It is not just the echo of a bone flute or a drum, but the living memory of those who came before. A reminder that music, in all its fragile, fleeting beauty, is the thread that binds us to our past and carries us forward into the unknown. In every effort to resurrect the music of the cave people, we find not only the sound of ancient nights, but the promise that, as long as we listen and create, the human song will never truly be lost. The legacy of Stone Age music is far more than a distant curiosity.
It is a living lesson, a silent guide threading through the centuries, quietly shaping who we are and how we understand ourselves. The echoes of ancient melodies, born in darkness and carried by breath and bone, have outlasted empires, languages, and even the shape of the world itself. When we listen for them, we discover not just the sounds of a forgotten age, but a reflection of our own deepest nature, a glimpse into what it means to be human at the most fundamental level. In every thump of the drum, every plaintive note of the flute, every communal chant and trembling harmony, there is evidence of an ancient longing, the need to belong, to communicate, to transform the chaos of existence into something meaningful. These first musicians, with their simple tools and boundless curiosity, were not so different from us. They too sought comfort against the unknown, connection against loneliness, and beauty against the harshness of life. Their music tells us that the urge to create is older than civilization, more resilient than language, and utterly universal. From the first moment, a rhythm united a group or a melody soothed a crying child, music became a tool for shaping emotions, for forging bonds that words alone could not create. Its power lies in its immediacy, felt in the body, understood in the heart, and shared without the need for explanation. Neuroscience now tells us what our ancestors sensed intuitively, that rhythm and melody touch the mind at a level deeper than logic or speech, activating circuits of empathy, memory, and joy. When we sing or dance together, our heartbeats align, our breath falls into rhythm, and the boundaries between self and other begin to blur. The music of our earliest ancestors reveals a psychology rooted in the communal. It speaks of a mind that finds strength not in isolation, but in shared experience, of a soul that seeks meaning in ritual, story, and the joining of many voices. Through music, Stone Age people rehearsed for the challenges of life, learning to listen, to adapt, to anticipate, to lead, and to follow. These skills, honed in song and dance, became the foundation for cooperation, creativity, and survival. In every note, we hear an invitation to remember that our greatest achievements arise not in solitude, but in the joyful complexity of community. As for evolution, the persistence of music across cultures and eras suggests it is not a mere byproduct, but a vital part of our development. Music helped to coordinate action, pass on knowledge, soothe the troubled, and inspire the bold. It was an early form of therapy and education, diplomacy and celebration, woven into the very fabric of daily life. The universality of music, its presence in every known human culture, points to its profound adaptive value, a gift shaped by the pressures and possibilities of survival. Perhaps most remarkable of all is how the music of the Stone Age transcends its time and place. Despite all that separates us from those early musicians, oceans, deserts, millennia, we still recognize the pulse of the drum, the rise and fall of a melody, the unity of a chorus. Music remains the one language that needs no translation, able to leap across boundaries of history and culture, inviting all to listen, to move, to feel. In the echoes of those ancient songs, we are reminded of our shared origins and our enduring potential. The Stone Age melodies are not relics to be pitied or merely studied. They are gifts, messages sent forward through time, calling us back to the circle, the fire, the dance. They invite us to listen with new ears, to create with open hearts, and to remember that as long as music is made and heard, the human spirit will always find its way home. Across the expanse of history, the dream of truly hearing the voice of cave people remains both a tantalizing possibility and an unsolved riddle. We sift through fragments, bone flutes lifted from the earth, the haunting echo of a drumbeat reborn in a cave, reconstructed chants humming beneath modern ceilings, and each discovery brings us closer, yet never fully delivers the original music that once shimmered in the darkness of forgotten nights. Still, the question lingers in every heart that listens. Can we ever truly hear the music of the past? Not as a distant echo, but as a living, breathing presence. In a sense, the answer is as mysterious and open-ended as the music itself. Science gives us glimpses, replicas of ancient instruments played in spaces where the first songs once rang out. The study of acoustics revealing where voices might have gathered and thundered together. The careful tracing of traditions that survive in folk melodies, rituals, and communal dances. Modern performers stand in the same shadows, breathe the same cool air, and coax sounds from materials unchanged for millennia. The notes they play are close, heartbreakingly close, and yet shaped by hands and minds that belong to our own age, carrying the weight of all that has come between. But if the original voice is forever just out of reach, perhaps that is not a loss but a blessing. The allure of ancient music lies not only in what is found, but in what remains unknown. A wellspring for imagination, a blank staff waiting for each new listener to write their own melody upon it. The real miracle is not the flawless reproduction of a vanished song, but the enduring call that draws us back to the caves, the firelight, the first heartbeat of human creativity. Every attempt to reconstruct, every shiver of a flute in the dark, every drum that stirs the air with echoes of the past, is itself a new chapter in the story. And so we lean in, straining to catch the faintest trace, and realize that the cave people are still singing, not in some distant world, but through us, in every moment of wonder, every shared song, every dance around a modern fire. Their music lives on wherever human hands reach for rhythm, wherever voices rise together in hope, grief, or joy. The past is not silent. It hums beneath our feet. It lingers in our dreams. It waits in the pause between one note and the next. If you listen closely, really listen, you might catch a fragment, a phrase, a fleeting presence. It might not be exactly what was heard so long ago, but it is born of the same need, the same hunger to belong and to create. In this way, the song of the cave people is not finished. It waits for us, asks us to imagine, to invent, to become, in our own way, a living echo of the first musicians. The music of the past invites us not just to remember, but to join in, to carry the melody forward, and to dream together, knowing that as long as the world turns and people gather, the voices of ancient nights will never truly be lost.